A week after my son Thomas married, his wife Serena knocked on my door. Beside her stood a man in an impeccably tailored suit, a slim leather attaché case clutched in his hand. "Evelyn," she purred, that practiced, saccharine smile pasted on her lips. "This is Mr. Thorne, a notary. We're here to help you sort through some house paperwork." The sound of her voice, so smooth yet so sharp, sent a cold tremor through me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. I knew, with chilling certainty, what they wanted. But they, in their calculated ambition, had no idea what quiet preparations I had laid in the preceding months. I was grateful then, truly, that I had kept silent about the vineyard estate my late husband, Arthur, had left me in his will. Not a whisper to anyone, especially not to Thomas. Watching Serena's eyes dart around my modest San Francisco Victorian, assessing its value with a greed I could almost taste, I understood. Silence had not just been a choice, it had been my fortress. But to tell this fully, I must rewind to the moment the illusion first began to crack. 3 months before, when Thomas had announced his intention to marry Serena, I was in my kitchen, the scent of fresh rosemary and garlic filling the air as I prepped a lamb roast. "Mom," he'd said, his smile still carrying that boyish charm that always disarmed me, "I really want you to get to know Serena before the wedding." He sounded earnest, and I, in my blindness, believed him. "My son, my only treasure, has found love," I'd replied, wiping my hands on my apron, a relic from my own mother. I had heard enough. 32 years old, sharp in corporate law, dark hair always sleek, nails perfectly manicured. She sounded on paper like the woman who would complete him, the mother of my future grandchildren. That afternoon I rushed to the market, selecting only the finest: organic lamb, vibrant heirloom tomatoes, fragrant herbs, and a bottle of the best local wine. I envisioned the dinner, conversations flowing, sharing recipes, and offering advice on keeping Thomas happy. I spent the night before cooking, my feet aching from hours on my feet, but I didn't care. The roasted lamb was tender, perfectly seasoned. My signature sourdough bread was warm and crusty. The seasonal salad burst with freshness, and the apple tart, infused with cinnamon from our own spice garden, was a sweet promise. These were the dishes Thomas had loved since he was a boy, emblems of our shared history. When it was time, I put on my best silk dress, a soft lavender reserved for truly special occasions. I styled my hair meticulously, even added a touch of lipstick. First impressions, after all, mattered. This woman was to be family. The doorbell rang, a sound that made my heart leap with anticipation. I opened the door, a wide, genuine smile on my face, my arms instinctively opening for a hug. Serena, however, merely offered a curt nod, her fingertips brushing my shoulder, a gesture so fleeting it felt like aversion. "Nice to meet you, ma'am," she murmured, her eyes avoiding mine, sweeping past me into the foyer. Her voice was cool, distant. She wore a severe emerald green dress, her high heels clicking on my hardwood floors like a judge's gavel. During dinner, I tried to bridge the chasm, asking about her work, her interests, and her dreams with Thomas, but each question met with clipped, one-word responses. Yes, no, perhaps. It was like conversing with a polished stone wall. What stung most was the subtle curl of her lip as her gaze drifted across my home, the almost imperceptible wrinkle of her nose as she tasted my food, as if it were a culinary curiosity, not an offering of love. Thomas, bless his heart, tried to smooth the rough edges. "Mom, the food is delicious as always," he'd offered, his words hanging in the air, barely masking the palpable discomfort. Serena merely poked at the lamb on her plate with her fork, dissecting each ingredient as if fearing contamination. Her glossy crimson nails, a stark contrast to my simple heirloom china, seemed to sneer. "Do you enjoy cooking, Serena?" I'd asked, a thread of hope in my voice, refilling her wineglass. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "I don't have time for that," she answered flatly. "I prefer dining out at proper establishments." The word proper landed like a shard of glass in my chest. My food wasn't proper. My home, then, wasn't proper either. Thomas cleared his throat, rushing to change the subject. But the message had been delivered, clear as a bell. To Serena, everything of mine was inherently beneath her. In the weeks that followed, each visit grew heavier, laden with unspoken judgments. She perched on the edge of my antique sofa as if she might soil her expensive clothes, her eyes fixed on her phone, an expression of profound boredom etched on her face. She never asked about my day, never feigned interest in truly knowing me. "Evelyn," she dropped one day as I poured coffee, "you'll be happy to have more time for yourself after Thomas and I are married, won't you?" It sounded less like a question and more like a premature dismissal, as if she had already decreed my separation from my son. "More time for myself?" I repeated, confused. "I enjoy being with you both." She glanced at Thomas, a look I didn't comprehend then, but now, in hindsight, I recognize as the silent agreement of conspirators. They were already planning to move me out of the picture. Wedding preparations became my own private torment. Serena dictated every detail without consulting me, as if I were a ghost inhabiting the periphery. "Have the cleaning lady help with the flowers," I overheard her say on the phone one afternoon. It took a few agonizing seconds for the realization to dawn. She meant me, the woman who had meticulously cared for Thomas's home and his needs his entire life. When I offered to bake the wedding cake myself, a cherished family tradition spanning generations, Serena's laugh was a sound that iced my blood. "Oh no, Evelyn, let the professionals handle that. I don't want anything homemade." That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, clutching the apron my own mother had given me on my wedding day, tears streaming down my face. My cakes had sweetened countless birthdays, baptisms, and graduations, each imbued with love. But to Serena, that love, that tradition, was merely homemade, a word she pronounced like a malady. The wedding day arrived like an inevitable storm. I rose before dawn, selecting my most elegant amethyst dress, purchased specifically for this occasion. I stopped at Carol's salon, where she gave me a hairstyle that made me look years younger. "You look beautiful, Evelyn," she said, adjusting a stray curl. "Your son will be so proud." Her words ignited a fragile flicker of hope. Perhaps today, everything would change. Perhaps this was a new beginning with Serena. I arrived at the church early, as I always do, wanting to ensure every detail was perfect for Thomas. Guests began to arrive, and I greeted them with a genuine smile. But when the ceremony began, a realization struck me, sharp and painful. Serena had arranged the seating, relegating me to the 5th row, behind her co-workers, behind acquaintances who had only met Thomas a handful of times. The groom's mother, seated far in the back, felt like a mere stranger. From that distant vantage point, I had to strain my neck to catch a glimpse of my own son walking down the aisle. The mothers of Serena's friends, women who had never known a sleepless night comforting Thomas through a fever, occupied seats of honor. I swallowed hard, maintaining my composure, but something deep inside me fractured. The reception was worse. Serena introduced me to her guests simply as Thomas's mom, never using my name, never affording me the respect of mother-in-law. "She cooks wonderfully," she added with that fake smile, distilling my entire life, my identity, into a mere domestic function. When the toasts began, I waited patiently. I had prepared heartfelt words, reminiscing about my beloved son, his journey, and my blessings for his new life. But Serena, conducting the proceedings like a ruthless orchestra director, called upon her parents, her siblings, her closest friends, even her work colleagues. "What about the groom's mother's toast?" someone finally ventured. Serena glanced my way, a cold, isolated smile on her lips. "Oh yes, Evelyn can say a few short words." Short, as if my 70 years of life, my 30 years of motherhood, could be condensed into a few dismissive lines. I stood, my legs trembling, every gaze a heavy weight upon me. "I want to thank God for this special day," I began, my voice clear despite the tremor. I had barely reached the second sentence when Serena began to clap, cutting me off abruptly. Others followed suit, and my words were drowned in a tide of forced applause. For dinner, they seated me at a back table with Serena's distant relatives, strangers who conversed amongst themselves as if I were invisible. From there, I watched Thomas, laughing with his new family, absorbed in his new life, while I chewed on a piece of chicken as tasteless as cardboard. When the dancing started, Thomas danced with Serena, then her mother, then her sisters. I sat still, smoothing my dress, desperately trying to keep the smile from dissolving on my face. The song ended, and Thomas never once looked my way. "Not dancing with your mom, Thomas?" Leo, a close family friend, asked, pausing at our table. Thomas laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, in a bit." But in a bit never arrived. Close to 11, I decided to leave. I had a long drive home, and I was weary of pretending. "Son, I'm going to head out," I said, touching his arm lightly. He gave me a quick, distracted hug, his eyes already searching for the music and laughter. "Thanks for everything, Mom. I love you." But he was looking over my shoulder at someone else. Serena appeared beside him, a possessive shadow. "Thanks for coming, Evelyn," she said, her tone sounding more like a permanent farewell than genuine gratitude. I walked to the parking lot, clutching my purse and the meticulously wrapped gift I'd prepared for them with so much love. Behind me, I heard Serena whisper to her friends, "Good thing she lives far away. She's not a bad person, but you know how mothers..." Their giggles followed me all the way to my old car. I got in, my hands shaking, my eyes brimming with tears. For 30 years, I had been the center of Thomas's world. In a single night, I had become a nuisance to be discarded. The drive home felt endless, the highway lights blurring through the tears I finally allowed to fall. A love song played on the radio, a cruel reminder of dancing with Arthur at our own wedding, the day he promised to always protect me. Now I faced this new reality alone. I reached home after midnight, my feet swollen, my heart shattered. I kicked off my shoes at the door, walking barefoot to my room, feeling the cold hardwood floor against my weary soles. The next morning, when Serena and her so-called notary appeared at my door ready to help with my house paperwork, I offered a simple, serene smile. They didn't know that this Evelyn, a 70-year-old widow in San Francisco, was no longer someone to be easily manipulated. The purple dress I had chosen for the wedding, a symbol of hope, now felt ridiculous, a uniform for an old woman clinging to a past that had vanished. The true story, the story of my quiet resistance, was only just beginning. The following days were a peculiar blend of oppressive silence and tense expectation. I hoped Thomas would call, perhaps to share details of their honeymoon, to check on me, to reaffirm the bond that had anchored us for 3 decades. But my phone remained stubbornly silent. A week after the wedding, I broke first. "Hi, son. How are you two? Was the honeymoon lovely?" I tried to infuse my voice with cheer, a desperate attempt to bridge the growing chasm. His answer was glacial. "Great, Mom. Serena sends her regards. I'll call you later. We're busy sorting out the house stuff." The house. He didn't say our house or my house, just the house, as if I were a fleeting inhabitant, never a foundation of his family world. I hung up, lonelier than I had ever felt, my gaze lingering on the photographs of young Thomas scattered throughout my living room. The bright-eyed boy who used to run into my arms every afternoon, now a stranger sending distant regards through his wife. 3 more days passed without a word. I decided to bake a batch of lemon poppy seed muffins, his childhood favorite, using it as a pretext for a visit. I dressed meticulously, chose my favorite jade green blouse, and drove to their new home in Tiburon, my heart a fragile vessel brimming with hope. I rang the doorbell, yearning to see Thomas's familiar smile. But Serena opened the door. She wore a deep crimson silk robe that shimmered with expense, her hair styled in a perfect chignon, as if she had just emerged from a salon. "Oh, Evelyn, what a surprise," she said, not a shred of genuine warmth in her voice. "I brought muffins for Thomas," I offered, holding up the gift basket tied with a golden bow, his favorite color. Serena took the basket without inviting me in, her eyes inspecting the muffins as if they were evidence of a crime. How thoughtful. Thomas is in a very important meeting. I'll let him know. I stood on the threshold, feeling utterly exposed, like a rejected salesperson. I waited for a glass of water, for a simple, "How are you?" But Serena was already closing the door. "Thanks for the muffins, Evelyn. Have a nice day." The slam of the door echoed like a final verdict. On the drive back, tears blurred the windshield. I pulled over to the side of the road, finally allowing myself to cry freely, pounding my wrinkled fists on the steering wheel. How had it come to this? How had I allowed that woman to so effortlessly snatch my son away? That night, eating a solitary dinner in front of the television, a memory surfaced, sharp and clear. Arthur's words to me, just before he passed. "Evelyn, if anything happens to me, don't let anyone trample you. You are stronger than you think, and you have more than you imagine." I hadn't fully grasped their meaning then. Now, those words began to illuminate a path. The next morning, I did what I had neglected for months. I pulled the old safe from the closet, opened it, and meticulously organized the stack of papers within. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, house deed, and insurance policies. Then I saw an envelope that changed everything. The deed to a sprawling vineyard estate, nearly 500 acres, nestled in the rolling hills of Sonoma, which Arthur had inherited from his great-aunt. The legal language was starkly unambiguous. I, Evelyn Thorne, was the sole owner of one of the region's most profitable agricultural properties, a legacy steeped in history and value. My heart pounded as I read the details. Acres of prime grapevines, a historic main villa with 5 bedrooms, 3 guest houses for workers and visitors. The most recent appraisal was staggering, enough to ensure a life of unparalleled comfort with a substantial inheritance remaining. But more than money, it was power. The power to dictate my own future, to depend on no one, to stop begging for affection or clinging to scraps of attention. For the first time in weeks, a genuine smile touched my lips. I placed the documents back in the safe, now more secure than ever, and made a silent vow. No one would know about this asset, not Thomas, and certainly not Serena. My gut instinct, honed by decades of life, told me this was my ace in the hole, my lifeline for the inevitable confrontation. That very week, my instincts proved chillingly accurate. Serena began calling me constantly, not to inquire about my well-being, nor to extend an invitation for dinner. Her calls had a singular predatory purpose, to subtly extract information about my property and finances. "Evelyn," she cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "Thomas and I believe you might be more comfortable in a smaller place. This large Victorian must be a significant responsibility for someone your age." Her words sent shivers down my spine. The thinly veiled suggestion that I relinquish my home was terrifying in its cold calculation. "No, I'm quite comfortable here," I kept my voice gentle even. "This house holds too many beautiful memories." "Of course, but do think it over," she persisted. "If you sell, you could truly enjoy yourself, perhaps travel. We could also help you manage the money, ensure it earns more." That syrupy tone now curdling my stomach. 2 days later, Thomas visited for the first time since the wedding, not merely as a son, but with a very clear agenda. He sat on the very sofa where I used to cradle him during his childhood nightmares. "Mom, Serena, and I have been discussing your future." "My future? You should enjoy life more, worry less," he muttered, but his voice sounded hollow, as if he were reciting a script written by someone else. This was the moment, the core betrayal. His inability to meet my gaze, his parroting of her words, revealed the terrifying truth. He was lost to me. That evening, after Tomas left with vague promises to visit more often, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea and made a decision that would change everything. I called Clara, the only friend I trusted implicitly. "Clara, I need to tell you something incredibly important, but you..." "My God, Evelyn, nearly 500 acres and you haven't told them?" Clara exclaimed. "Thank goodness you kept silent." I saw the calculating glint in that girl's eyes at the wedding. Her words confirmed my deepest fears. "Clara," I said, my voice heavy with a premonition, "I feel something ominous approaching. The way they look at me, like an obstacle to be removed. I'm afraid they're plotting something." "Listen, best friend," Clara said, her familiar firm tone cutting through my... "Miss Thorne, based on your friend's account and the documents I've reviewed, your situation is not uncommon," he stated, his voice calm, after meticulously examining my papers. "It's often relatives, well-meaning or not, who exert pressure on older adults to transfer assets." He spread the documents, a mosaic of my life's work, across his polished mahogany desk. "My recommendation is to build impenetrable legal..." "Tell him about the notary." I recounted how Serena had arrived with Mr. Thorne, brandishing house papers, an unannounced ambush designed to intimidate. "Classic," the lawyer muttered, making swift notes. "They often present a seemingly friendly notary, overlooking irregularities, pressuring for signatures under the guise of simplifying procedures. I have witnessed individuals lose everything in a single signing session." "So what can I do to protect myself?" I asked, feeling like a soldier standing alone on an invisible battlefield. For the first time that day, Mr. Maxwell offered a small, reassuring smile. "A great deal. We will establish an irrevocable trust, meticulously document every coercive attempt, and most importantly, prepare you with precise responses for when they reveal their true intentions." We left his office with a clear strategy and a robust set of documents designed to shield my estate. This time, I was no longer an easily manipulated mother. Evelyn Thorne of San Francisco was ready to fight back. More vital than any legal protection, I walked out of that office with an absolute certainty. I wasn't overreacting, nor was I paranoid. My suspicions were well-founded. Clara invited me for dinner at her home. Her husband, Leo, greeted me with his familiar, comforting bear hug. "Evelyn, that girl has money in her eyes," Leo declared, as we ate the coq au vin Clara had prepared. Even at the wedding, I sensed something wasn't right. She kept asking about who owned what, who was in which business. Their observations confirmed my darkest fears. In the days that followed, I maintained my usual routine, but with a heightened sense of vigilance. Every phone call, every unexpected visit, every casual remark about my age or my need for help was now filtered through a new lens. It was as if I had suddenly developed X-ray vision, piercing through their polished facades to discern their true intentions. On Wednesday afternoon, while I was tending to my rose garden, I saw Thomas's car pull into my driveway. My heart raced, no longer with joy, but with a cold anxiety. As he stepped out, accompanied by Serena, I knew the moment I had dreaded most had arrived. "Hi, Mom." Thomas forced a smile, a brittle mask he had learned to wear since his marriage. Serena followed, carrying a thick folder, radiating a smug confidence that made my skin crawl. "Let us come in. We need to discuss something important with you." I invited them into the living room, the very space where Thomas had spent hours playing with toy cars, where I had read him stories every night, where we had shared countless laughter watching cartoons. Now, that sacred space had been transformed into a cold courtroom, and I, the accused. "Mom, we're very worried about you," Thomas began, his tone strangely patronizing. "Serena and I believe you need support managing your finances. At your age, feeling overwhelmed by responsibilities is perfectly normal." Serena, with the practiced precision of a general unfolding battle maps, opened her folder. "Evelyn," she continued, her voice unnervingly smooth, "we've consulted several financial specialists for older adults. Everyone agrees the best course of action is to simplify your assets, consolidating everything into safer, more easily managed options." "Which specialists?" I asked, feigning confusion, though a furious heat pulsed through my veins. Why is it that I haven't spoken to any specialists at all? I recorded every word, every gesture, precisely as Mr. Maxwell had instructed. Thomas interjected, adopting the patient, condescending tone people often use with children. "Exactly, because you haven't had proper advice. Serena knows highly qualified people who can help you protect your money and secure your future." Serena then pulled out a stack of documents, fanning them across the coffee table like a hand of winning cards. Take a look. This is a very convenient proposal, an investment fund with guaranteed returns, far better than allowing money to sit idle in real estate that requires constant maintenance and causes endless headaches. I pretended to scrutinize the papers with the weary eyes of a confused old woman, but in truth, I was memorizing every detail. The document outlined a plan. Sell my Victorian, then transfer the proceeds into a joint account, granting Thomas and Serena full decision-making authority over the portfolio, ostensibly to protect me from potential scams. If I sell the house, where would I live? I asked, my voice trembling slightly, playing exactly the role of the fragile grandmother they expected. Serena's smile was a masterpiece of polished, false sweetness. "Oh, Evelyn, don't worry. We found a very nice assisted living facility, a senior care center with 24/7 medical care. You would be so much safer and more comfortable there." A nursing home. The words echoed in my mind like a death knell. There it was, their meticulously crafted plan. Strip me of my home, seize my assets, and confine me somewhere I would no longer be an impediment, all wrapped in glossy paper labeled concern. A nursing home, I repeated, allowing my voice to waver just enough. "But son, I am perfectly fine in my own home. This is where all our memories are." Serena and Thomas exchanged that conspiratorial glance I had learned to recognize, the silent language of schemers. "Mom, we know it's difficult, but think it through," Thomas leaned in, offering a falsely benevolent smile. "There you'd have friends, activities, doctors, and we could visit whenever we want, without worrying about your safety." Whenever we want. Not every day, not regularly, but at their convenience, like visiting a boarded pet. The anger surged, so potent that I struggled to maintain my performance as a frail old lady. Serena pulled out more papers. "We've run the numbers. Selling the house, plus a few smart investments, and you'll live very comfortably without a single worry. We'll handle all the paperwork and make all the financial decisions." The final trap clicked into place. They would hold the reins of my entire financial life, while I withered in a facility, surviving on crumbs of their attention. A plan of exquisite cruelty, executed with the cold precision of financial surgeons. "What if I don't want to sell?" I asked softly, as if the thought had just occurred to me, a sudden, fleeting resistance. Serena sighed theatrically, like a patient teacher explaining basic arithmetic to a slow child. "Evelyn, we understand it's difficult, but at your age, living alone in such a large house isn't safe. What if you fall and no one knows? Or if someone takes advantage of your kindness and scams you?" The irony of being lectured about scammers by the very person attempting to defraud me was almost too much to bear. I need time to think." I rubbed my temples, feigning a headache. "It's a lot to process at once." Thomas stood and hugged me, a brief embrace, as cold and hollow as a Judas's kiss, devoid of a son's true affection. "Of course, Mom, but don't take too long," he said. Serena stacked the documents with the self-satisfied air of someone who believes they have already won. After they left, I collapsed into a chair, feeling as if I had just weathered a hurricane. My hands shook, not from age, but from the raw fury I had suppressed. I immediately picked up the phone and called Mr. Maxwell. "Mr. Maxwell, they just came, exactly as you predicted. They want me to sell everything, put me in a facility, and take over my money." His voice was calm, yet firm. "Miss Thorne, this is the critical juncture. Do not sign anything, no matter the pressure. If possible, record all future conversations. We need to document their true intent." That night, sleep was an impossible luxury. I paced my home like a ghost, my fingers tracing the contours of each object imbued with memory. The rocking chair where I had nursed Thomas, the dining table where we did homework together, the piano I played to soothe his nightmares. All of it slated to be sold, scattered, to satiate the greed of a woman who saw motherly love only as an obstacle on her path to wealth. The next morning, Clara arrived early, carrying a small digital voice recorder her granddaughter had lent her. "It's incredibly simple to use," she explained, demonstrating. "Press this button and it records for 8 hours straight. Slip it into your purse or apron pocket. If they return with more proposals, we'll have every word." For 3 tense days, I maintained a fragile calm, waiting for the hunter's next move. On Friday afternoon, the phone rang. Serena, her voice dripping with artificial honey. "Have you thought about our proposal, Evelyn? We found a lovely place in assisted living, but we need to reserve soon. There's a waiting list." The manufactured urgency in her voice confirmed their eagerness to close the deal before I could consult anyone else. "Yes, I've thought a lot," I answered, adopting my best performance as a hesitant old lady. "Could you come by tomorrow to explain the details again? At my age, I sometimes forget." I could almost see her triumphant smile through the phone. "Yes, Evelyn, tomorrow afternoon we'll bring all the paperwork. You'll see, this is the best decision for everyone." Best for everyone, as if being stripped of my home and freedom were a generous favor bestowed upon me. On Saturday afternoon, they arrived punctually, like vultures keeping a macabre appointment. This time they brought Mr. Thorne, the notary who had first appeared at my door, a thin man with a sparse mustache and his ubiquitous leather briefcase. His eyes scanned my home like a professional appraiser while he feigned courtesy. "Miss Thorne, very pleased to see you again," he smiled, a smile that never reached his eyes. "I'm prepared to streamline all procedures. The faster we resolve this, the fewer complications." Before we began, I placed my concealed recorder on a small side table, making sure it was activated. "Does everyone agree that this discussion should be audio recorded for the protection of all parties?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. I settled into my favorite armchair, the one where I had once rocked baby Thomas, and allowed them to stage their grotesque performance of feigned concern. "Mom, we've brought the paperwork all ready," Thomas said, laying the sheets on the table. "You just need to sign here, here, and here, and we'll handle the rest." His finger pointed to dotted lines like crosses in a graveyard. Serena sat directly beside me, a hard sell proximity favored by aggressive salespeople. "Look, photos of where you'll live," she chirped, displaying glossy images of manicured gardens, a communal TV room, even yoga classes for seniors. It looked less like a home and more like a beautifully disguised hospital. Mr. Thorne opened his briefcase, ceremoniously producing his notary seal, a bottle of blue ink, and a stack of notary letterhead forms. "Ma'am, these documents are drafted perfectly to protect your interests," he stated, his voice devoid of true emotion. "A property sale, fund transfer into a family trust, and authorization for relatives to manage your finances should you become incapacitated." Incapacitated. The words struck me like a physical blow. I smiled ever so slightly, a secret smile, understood by no one but myself, and looked up. "Then let's begin by reading aloud each clause, so the audio record captures everything in full as required. Shall we?" They had even prepared the next cruel step. If one day I dared to oppose their decisions, they would attempt to have me declared cognitively incompetent. The plan was so meticulously vile that it sent chills through me. "What if later on I changed my mind?" I asked deliberately, my voice trembling, playing the part of the confused old woman to perfection. Mr. Thorne and Serena exchanged a quick, knowing glance, a silent communication the recorder couldn't capture, but which I etched into my memory as irrefutable proof of their collusion. "Oh, Evelyn, these decisions are meant to be final, for your own protection," Serena said, with an exaggerated patience that grated on my nerves. "If you could change your mind all the time, unscrupulous individuals could take advantage and trick you into signing things that aren't good for you." Unscrupulous individuals. How supremely ironic. The very person stripping me of everything was lecturing me about predatory opportunists. I had to bite my tongue to stifle a bitter laugh. "And also, Mom," Thomas held my hand, his touch artificially gentle, "think of the peace of mind we'll have, knowing you're safe and cared for. We won't have to worry about you anymore." won't have to worry about you anymore. Translated from the language of manipulators, it meant, we won't have to pretend to love you once we control your money. My tears erupted then, unbidden, no longer an act. It was the raw, guttural pain of a mother betrayed by the child she had lovingly raised. "Don't cry, ma'am," Mr. Thorne soothed with professional coldness. "Feeling emotional during major changes is normal. You'll feel more at peace afterward." He pulled out a gold-plated pen and placed it before me, like a pistol to my temple. I took the pen, my hand shaking, and moved it towards the first sheet. The air in the room was taut, vibrating like a violin string before it snaps. My two executioners held their breath, poised for the moment of their final triumph. Serena leaned in, a predator sensing its prey. Right then, like an angel knocking at the doorbell chimed. "Expecting anyone?" Mr. Thorne snapped, his irritation momentarily breaking through his composed facade. "No," I answered, standing slowly. It was, as Mr. Maxwell had advised, the county prosecutor's investigator whom I had proactively requested to witness the proceedings, due to the clear signs of elder fraud. I opened the door. There stood Clara, accompanied by Mr. Maxwell and Detective Miller, who carried a camera for record-keeping. "Good afternoon, Evelyn," Clara smiled, a beacon of strength. "Hope we're not too late." "Come in," I said, the words feeling like a battle cry. Mr. Maxwell entered, radiating the authoritative presence only seasoned lawyers possess. Detective Miller followed, raising his camera to begin recording. Thomas turned pale, a ghastly white. Serena stumbled, attempting to gather the stack of incriminating documents. Mr. Thorne stood frozen, like a pillar of salt. "What's going on, Mom?" Thomas asked, his voice strained. "Hello, everyone," Mr. Maxwell said politely, his voice resonating with calm authority. "I represent Miss Evelyn Thorne. As scheduled for today, I'll be supervising this legal transaction, along with Detective Miller from the District Attorney's Office, specializing in crimes targeting vulnerable adults. I trust all documents are in proper order and that my client has had sufficient time to review them with independent counsel." The silence that followed was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Mr. Thorne hastily pocketed his gold-plated pen as if it had burned his fingers. Serena's eyes darted towards the door, calculating an escape route. "Excuse me, and you are?" Mr. Thorne attempted to salvage a semblance of his authority. Mr. Maxwell smiled, the quiet, knowing smile of a man who had unmasked countless frauds. "Robert Maxwell, attorney for Elder Asset Protection, and this is Detective Daniel Miller from the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, assigned to crimes targeting vulnerable individuals. At my request, we are here to witness and record this discussion, due to indications of elder fraud." Serena's face shifted from confident predator to chalk white in seconds. Mr. Thorne snapped his briefcase shut with clumsy, fumbling motions, as if stuffing away incriminating evidence. Thomas stood stock still, his gaze flitting between them and me, as if for the first time in months he truly saw his mother. "Counsel," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in weeks. "I'm glad you arrived in time. I was about to sign some papers and wanted to make sure everything is proper." I placed the digital recorder on the table, a small, unassuming device that now felt like a grenade with the pin pulled. Detective Miller switched on his camera, following protocol. "Ma'am, could you explain what kind of documents they're asking you to sign and under what circumstances?" His voice, imbued with legal authority, made the guilty tremble. Serena tried to interject with a forced, brittle laugh. "Oh, it must be a misunderstanding. We're just helping my mother-in-law with some convenient paperwork." "Paperwork?" I repeated, a surprising smile playing on my lips. "You call it paperwork to make me sell my home, hand over all my money, and commit me to a nursing facility so the two of you can control all my assets?" Mr. Thorne sprang up, aiming to slip away. "Perhaps there's been a mistake. I only came to provide notary services." Detective Miller was already standing neatly in the doorway. "Hold on, colleague. I'd like to see the documents you brought. This is part of an investigation into real estate fraud." Right then, I played my ace. I walked to the bedroom, retrieved my safe, opened it in front of everyone, and took out the vineyard estate deed. I spread the papers across the table, savoring each tick of the clock, each second of confusion that bloomed on the predators' faces. "Isn't this interesting?" I said. "My late husband left me a vineyard estate of about 500 acres. I simply hadn't mentioned it yet. Mr. Maxwell, please read the most recent appraised value." Mr. Maxwell took the file, a subtle smile of poetic justice on his lips. "According to the latest appraisal, the market value of this vineyard estate, not including the grapes, agricultural machinery, and auxiliary structures, is in the many tens of millions of dollars range." Absolute silence descended. Serena's mouth hung open like a stranded fish. Thomas stared at the paper as if it were an extraterrestrial object. "Tens of millions," I repeated, savoring each word. "And yet you two were so worried about my supposed poverty and my incompetence. How truly kind." My voice dripped with a bittersweet sarcasm. Mr. Thorne flailed one last time. "Ma'am, that changes everything. You need specialists to manage a portfolio of that size." But Detective Miller was already photographing all the documents they had brought with them. "Exactly," I beamed, "which is precisely why, a week ago, I engaged Mr. Maxwell to handle all my legal and financial matters. But thank you for your concern." At last, Serena found her voice, raspy like a wounded crow. "Evelyn, we didn't know. We just wanted to help." "Help me?" I stood, reclaiming the dignity I had thought lost. "Help me by selling my home without asking, locking me in a facility against my will, and stealing my right to decide my own life?" Thomas spoke then, and for the first time in months, I heard my real son. "Mom, we thought it was what's best for you." His eyes were wet, and I couldn't discern if it was remorse or sheer frustration at having their elaborate game exposed. "What's best for me," I softened, "would have been to ask what I wanted. What's best for me would have been to respect my decisions. What's best for me would have been to see me as your mother, not an obstacle to your happiness." Mr. Maxwell placed a protective hand on my shoulder. "Miss Thorne, I think it's time for everyone to leave. We have sufficient documentation to proceed legally, if necessary." Mr. Thorne practically ran for the door. Serena slunk after him, not bothering to maintain the mask of the considerate daughter-in-law. Thomas lingered for a few seconds, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mom, can we talk later?" For the first time, the question sounded real and bare. I nodded slowly, promising nothing. When they left, I remained with my true allies, Clara, Mr. Maxwell, and Detective Miller. For the first time in months, I felt safe in my own home. 3 months later, I sat on the veranda of the Vineyard Villa, watching the sunset paint my land in hues of fiery orange. It was also my 70th birthday, a gift of freedom I had given myself. Thomas visited once a week, alone, meticulously trying to mend the bond nearly destroyed by his pursuit of a woman who saw him only as a ladder to wealth. Serena's calls all went straight to voicemail. Rumor had it they divorced when she realized I was not the weak, impoverished widow she had imagined. Now I dedicate my life to helping other women facing similar situations. My villa has become a refuge, a sanctuary where they can share their stories and receive free legal guidance. I learned that silence can be gold, but speaking up at the right time is a diamond. At 70, I finally understood Arthur's last words. I had more than I thought, and I was stronger than I believed. 6 months after that life-changing afternoon, I sit on this veranda with a hot cup of coffee, watching the sunrise over my 500 acres of freedom. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingles with the orange blossoms I planted last week. Each morning, a symphony reminding me why I had to fight. The Vineyard's main house has become something I never imagined, a haven for women like me. Every week I receive letters, phone calls, and visits. They hear my story and recognize their own nightmare within it. They leave with the one thing I most want to give, the strength to say no. "Miss Thorne," they say in trembling voices, "my daughter-in-law is forcing me to sell my house." Or, "My son says I can't handle my money anymore." Yesterday, Margaret, a 73-year-old widow, arrived at my vineyard. Her children had convinced a court to declare her incapable of managing her assets. She walked in with a small suitcase and the crushing weight of family betrayal. "Miss Thorne," she said through tears, "my own children keep me under house arrest. They take my pension and won't let me go out alone. They say it's for my own good." I seated her in the same rocking chair where I once cried from loneliness, poured chamomile tea into a delicate porcelain cup, and told her my whole story. I saw hope return to her eyes for the first time in months. "Can I truly take back control of my life?" she asked, like a lost child finding their way home. "Not only can you," I held her wrinkled hands, "it is your right, and you are not alone." The next morning, Mr. Maxwell reviewed Margaret's file. We found multiple procedural irregularities in the incapacity ruling, enough to overturn it. Now, Margaret smiles every day, and her children have been forced to return the funds they had withdrawn for safety. My story spread like wildfire across the region. Reporters came to interview me. Social workers invited me to speak to community groups. I received letters from all over, even from Europe and South America. "Your courage inspired me to defend my rights," a woman in Lisbon wrote. Another in Buenos Aires thanked me. "Thanks to your example, my family no longer treats me as invisible." But not everything was easy. Tomás, my son, visited every Sunday by himself, meticulously trying to rebuild the bridge his wife had blown up. The first visits were awkward, filled with embarrassed silences, apologies that sounded rehearsed. Gradually, I saw the child he once was flicker behind the eyes of the man who had allowed another to betray his mother. 2 weeks ago, as we walked past the ancient olive groves, he said, "Mom, I don't know how to apologize for what I did. It's like I was hypnotized, unable to see the obvious." His tears were real, and for the first time since the wedding, I recognized my child. "Son," I stopped and looked him straight in the eyes. "Forgiveness isn't asked for, it's earned. And people prove it with actions, not just words." He nodded, understanding that reconciliation would be a long journey, one that required patience and tangible evidence of remorse. As for Serena, she vanished from our lives as quickly as she had arrived. Clara, my best friend, who has ears everywhere, said Serena had planned to file for divorce to claim half the assets, but Thomas, on Mr. Maxwell's advice, had legally protected everything. She left town without a goodbye, probably in search of her next target. Mr. Thorne, the slippery notary, lost his license after Detective Miller submitted irrefutable evidence of a ring that defrauded older adults. The recording of the conversation in my home was the key, helping dismantle a network that had drained money from dozens of elderly people in the area. Clara remains my steadfast companion now. She lives in one of the vineyard's guest houses, not as a hired hand, but as the sister I chose. Together, we run the refuge we established, organize workshops on the rights of older adults, and plan trips we never had the chance to take when we were young. "Who would have thought that at 70 we'd become activists?" Clara joked as we sorted through a table piled with applications for legal support. I smiled, remembering the timid woman I was a year ago, content with crumbs of attention, allowing others to decide my fate. Mr. Maxwell is no longer just my lawyer. He has become the legal director of our foundation. We've successfully pushed through changes to several local regulations that better protect older adults and are working with federal lawmakers on broader reforms. "Miss Thorne," he said at our most recent meeting, "in 6 months, you've done more for elders' rights than many organizations have done in decades." Every night before bed, I walk through the garden, reflecting on the road traveled. Sometimes I find handwritten letters placed in the mailbox under the old oak, left by women who have stayed here. "Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to reclaim my dignity," one letter read. Another, "Thank you for showing me that self-respect has no expiration date." Tomorrow, a group of ladies from California will come to hear our story and learn how to build similar shelters in their cities. The movement is spreading like ripples on a pond, touching lives I never thought I could reach. At 70, I realized old age isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's the beginning of the strongest chapter. I learned that the wisdom accumulated over decades is a weapon more powerful than youth. That lost dignity can always be won back if we dare to fight for it. My name is Evelyn Thorne, and this is my Declaration of Independence. I will never again let anyone make me feel invisible, useless, or disposable. If my story inspires even one woman to raise her voice against abuse and manipulation, then every tear, every betrayal, every moment of pain will have been worth it. In the end, Arthur was right. I was stronger than I thought, and I had more than I believed. I just needed to remember who I really was.